You're now live.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks ever so much for coming along today to the place scrutiny. We've got two items on the agenda: social housing review and transport services. So thanks everybody for coming along. I will try to manage the timings better than we did last time. Sorry to say that Councillor Caffrey can't make it as chair, so I am standing in as deputy. Could we have substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. You have got Councillor Benton is substituting for Councillor Caffrey, and we have apologies from Councillor Caffrey, Councillor Bellinger and Councillor B. Smith.
Right, thanks. Members' interests, to remind members of the need to declare any disposable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on the agenda. So I must declare that I am a tenant of Together Housing. Does anybody else have? Anybody else? No?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
Right, that's fine. And just before we move on, can I just say a big thank you to Diane, who stepped back in after having left Calderdale, and this is her last meeting with us for the time being. So good luck with whatever you're doing. Well, you're invigilating. You should
That's
be
right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And also a really sad farewell to Frizana, who's been a great support to me on place, and I'll miss her very much, but I know that she's going on to take a bit of a different career. I don't know if she's said what she's doing it with, so I'll leave that to her to talk. But thanks ever so much, Frizana. You've been a great support. Right.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the agenda. The admission of the public, it's not recommended that the public be excluded. So can we move to the minutes of the previous meeting held on 24th of February and the meetings held on the 3rd of March, which was the extra petitions meeting that we had. Would anybody like to propose?
I'm open as a correct record, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. And seconding? Anybody seconding? Can I second them?
You can, Chair.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thank you. Right, so swiftly moving on. Right, so the first item on the agenda is the social housing review, and I think we're going to have the first presentation from Kate and Stephanie Furness. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you, Councillor. My name's Kate McNicholas. I'm Assistant Director for Economy, Housing and Investment here at Calderdale Council. So today, just a brief introduction to the item. So as you'll be well aware, social housing is a really important part of tenure mix for housing and people here in Calderdale. It provides homes for people, but also other important services too, and also is a route to engaging with the residents in those homes. So today we have 5 registered social landlords here before you at Scrutiny Committee. And today's conversation is an opportunity to share some information about the different types of services that they provide, and also to discuss some of the issues that are facing social housing providers, and also, more importantly, their tenants. So Steph Furness, who's our Housing Strategy and Growth Manager, is going to give a quick presentation before you launch into that discussion. She'll pick up on issues around the scale of the social housing provision that we have here in Calderdale and associated waiting lists, give you a bit of information on energy performance, and then provide some headlines in terms of the social value impact of social housing. So the kind of the wider positive benefits in terms of the outcomes that social housing provides, and also finally a little bit of some of the information around tenant engagement. So what we're hearing collectively from tenants. So if it's okay with you, Councillor, I will pass straight over to Steph.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you. So as Kate says, I'm not going to focus for too long on the presentation, so we've got plenty of time for discussion. So if I'm whizzing through too fast, please let me know and I'll slow down. So This is a snapshot of the social housing we've got in the borough. We've got 33 registered providers or social housing providers that operate, and they represent over 14,000 homes in the borough. Our smallest RP has 1 home, right up to our largest Together Housing group, who've got over 10,000. So we do have a varied picture in the borough. And this can include anything from some of our arms houses, which obviously existed for a long time, through to some of our specialist supported providers as well. Here is a up-to-date list of what's on our housing register, currently known as Key Choice. We know that there has been an increase of applications on Key Choice, but Together Housing, who manage this, will be going through a review over spring, just updating this, because we know there's a lot of inactive applications, and that kind of skews the picture a little bit. So we should have a more up-to-date picture of that when we get to summer. The next slide talks about EPC rating or SAP rating, which is a reflection of the energy efficiency of a home. Can see that social housing stock generally performs better, and that's for a number of reasons. The stock is generally newer than some of the stock in the owner-occupied or private rented. Investment programs at scale by registered providers as well, and also some historic long-term decent homes program funding as well. This stock conditions survey is due to be updated. It's about 7 years old now, and the requirement is around 7 years for it to be updated. So we should have some more up-to-date information with this later this year, early next year. Moving on to the main topic that we're here for, about social value and a picture from Tenants. The RPs that are here tonight, we've invited 5 along to provide a bit of a picture of what's going on in Calderdale. And what they provided is anything from examples such as Horton Housing, where they recruit local people. They put an emphasis on people with lived-in experience as part of their supported housing provision, right through to empowering customers through pathways into work, supporting them with CV writing, interview skills and training. We've also got Calder Valley Community Land Trust here tonight, and their example here is about holding community assets, making sure they're accessible and available to people in our community for the long term. Some of our RPs even have separate charitable arms. So Together Housing Group is one of those examples, and New Ground, where they support people through employment and health. We've got another angle here, is that all the RPs here tonight have either recently completed or are actively developing in Calderdale. A lot of their construction contracts, if not all of them, will have social value running through them. So that can be anything from bringing apprentices on board to contributing to community projects and engaging with schools. The next 2 slides focuses on messages from tenants. I won't go through it too much. I'll let the words speak for themselves. But as a whole, we know that most social housing tenants, some of which will be the most vulnerable in our borough, are really feeling the weight of increasing cost of living, food and fuel being a prime example, which some of these examples do pick up on. And that's a real challenge for how RPs have changed over the last couple of years to support these tenants and to help them sustain their tenancies. But there are some positive messages too. We've got one from Calder Valley Community Land Trust here about, and one on the next page about the impact of having a safe and warm home has on somebody's mental health and well-being. So slides 9 and 10 are about the activities that RPs do to support tenants. And I thought this was a really useful picture that Together Housing provided, showing the kind of wide range impacts they have around welfare benefits and tenancy sustainability. The example they provided as part of this, which kind of brought it home to me, was one of their tenants who was fleeing domestic violence. Through their welfare benefits advisor, they're able to secure accommodation. They're able to get backdated payments of universal credit, which meant that they had around £15,000 that they didn't have before, and also increase their monthly universal credits amount. This gave that person the confidence to be able to actually move out and know that they could sustain their tenancy, as well as buy the furniture that they needed to be able to start again. Other activities, so it can be anything from bringing empty properties back into use, it can be repurposing existing buildings, it can be providing different tenures of opportunity. So affordable housing isn't just rent, it could be accessible home ownership, such as shared ownership. And I think we're getting to the end of the presentation now. We've got here, where are we up to? So I think one of the last examples is how even from a small scheme to a large scheme, the support that they can offer tenants and the wider community really does cover a lot. So from multi-million-pound schemes where 30 apprenticeships are expected to be created, and that scheme in the bottom is on site, with Craven Mount, which is supporting people who were previously sleeping rough. They've repurposed that building. There's some really good work going on in Calderdale. The last two slides talks about what do RPs and tenants need from us. And that's about continuing to increase co-production of services, something that the council's worked quite hard at doing, but there's definitely room to do more. And that's making sure that service users and vulnerable customers are part of those services being designed, either services that are going to be commissioned by the council, but also directly by RPs. Supporting our RPs to deliver place shaping work, that can be from, again, like I said, repurposing existing buildings right through to demolition. And the last slide focuses on kind of the new build developments. So we know from the press release that's gone out this week that the local plan is moving forward. There is work to do about improving our planning approval process and pre-planning advice, which is something that my team and planning are already considering and looking at. Potential gap funding for development of schemes, and really important one, facilitating that joint RP community projects and working, which is something that's made a huge difference on already. I think generally making sure that the council has a holistic approach, that we see our registered providers as partners that we can work with for the long term. And I think that is it. So a very quick canter through. If you want me to run back over anything, let me know, but very much over to our RPs as well if they want to contribute anything in particular.
Has anybody got any questions on Steph's presentation? Thanks, Steph. Oh. No, nobody. Would it? Oh, Steph, sorry. Yes, Steph, you've got your hand up. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it was either your first or your second slide, and it was talking about gold, silver, and bronze. Is that the status of the person on the waiting list, or the status of the housing, and what's the difference?
Yeah, I will look at Jeanette as well to help me here, but in brief, gold is really when somebody's in acute housing need. So all the bands are a reflection of their severity of housing need. Gold being the greatest, where it could be in our homelessness service accommodation, it could be in hospital waiting to be discharged. Silver generally is around medical needs. They might not have the adequate housing based on their medical needs, and bronze being a general need to move.
Thank you.
Jeanette's shaking her head, so I think I've covered it.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question? What does SAP stand for?
Oh gosh, testing me now. Is it on the slide? Otherwise I might not know off the top of my head.
It did. I don't think it was.
Quick look. Standard assessment. No, it can't mean that. It's about, I think it's about the air tightness and, like I said, the energy, overall energy rating of a property, but I could confirm that, because that isn't the best explanation.
And also, when we look at those, I suppose this will be something that would be more interesting, well, probably easier to ask the housing providers, but the 63, the value attributed is 63 to people in social housing. While it is a better result from the other two groups, it is still only band D. And that isn't great, especially when we're sort of at a time when energy is so expensive. I expect to find out a bit more tonight about what's being done to sort of try and help people. I know that you've got the programmes around funding, helping people who are in difficulty, but what about stopping people getting into difficulty? What schemes are going in place? Steph, have you still got your hand up again? No. Well, you have got it up, so take it down. Thank you. Paul, did you want to come in?
Yes, with regards to helping people, the council were in the process of giving us a 21-year lease on 2 masonettes above One Stop in Hebdom Bridge. So we've had plans drawn up to retrofit those properties to make them super energy efficient. So that's a small thing that we're doing, but we're hoping that's going to be a project where others can come and look at it and learn from it and maybe apply that elsewhere. So, that's really positive, we think.
Yep. I had just one more question. I don't know if this is I think actually I'll leave it and ask the housing providers. So are we okay to get on with Jeanette? Did you want to speak to this, or?
I did. I can't get my hand up, unfortunately. I think there's something wrong with my system. So I just wanted to talk about some of the things we are doing, or we have done around solar panels, and because obviously we've fitted a significant amount of solar panels in Calderdale, but also we're testing the ground source heat pumps. I just think it's worth mentioning that because it's new technology, and also we've set customers with us as well. When it's new technology, people get really worried about that. But we've had some real success, particularly in Elland. We've got a block of flats that we've put ground source heat pumps in, and before that they had storage heaters, and traditionally that block always said they were really cold, energy bills were high, they were home most of the day, so storage heaters didn't necessarily work for that sort of demographic. So what we did, we put some ground source heat pumps. I have to say we've had some significant success of halving bills. Now that's brilliant at this time of year, and actually all of them are in their early 70s. A full block is in, and they've adapted to the new change really, really well, and that's a real success. What we're trying to do now is replicate that across the borough. What I would say is it's incredibly expensive. So we have to, it's going to take us some time to get to where we need, but we're always testing new products on the market. We're looking at new things that are rising all the time, making sure that also fitting them now, and they're also future proofing for later on, so they're not just here for 5 years, they're here for 25 years to make it cost effective. But I think there's lots of really good and exciting things happening in Calderdale, particularly around retrofitting and keep insulation, all of those things we're trying to do. But what we can't do is do it all at once, and we have to take a measured approach around that cost. Thanks.
Thank you. Are we okay to would people here from the housing associations, would they like to go on with their presentations? Will we take them one by one? I've got down Horton Housing. Angela, would you like to? Is that you? No, you're from Yorkshire Housing. Sorry. I've got a name. Is anybody here from Horton Housing?
We do have the RPs represented, but we haven't prepared particular presentations. The presentation was as a whole that they fed into, as well as the additional summaries you had in advance.
Yes, okay. So I suppose basically everybody on the scrutiny panels had the chance to read them. Are we okay just to go ahead and ask questions relating to the individual sort of organisations or to Calderdale as a whole?
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Lynn. You're muted.
Sorry, I hope you don't mind me jumping in, although I'm not actually a member of the panel. I just wanted to take us back to the presentation which Steph gave, in which she talked about the length of time that people have to wait on the waiting list. And I know as a councillor for Park Ward that it's not been unusual for me to have had to support people over a process of perhaps 2, 3, 4 years before they get out of their unsuitable private rented accommodation into social housing. So in a way, seeing that the average waiting list at the moment is 33 months, i.e. nearly 3 years, that does very much accord with my experience. So I just wanted to kind of draw attention to that, because it isn't just, oh, well, people are waiting and it's not a problem. People are often waiting and are very overcrowded and have all sorts of reasons why they need to be rehoused. So for me, what I took from that initial presentation from Steph is we just need to do a lot more to get more provision, really. That's all I wanted to say. I hope that's all right. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
I'm on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I would just, anybody, so Paul, so you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, we haven't got a presentation, but I thought it might be useful if each of the RPs highlighted a couple of things, so I'll volunteer to start. We've had a really positive relationship with the council, and our best example of that is our first development at Burke's Court in Walsden of 6 bungalows, where the council gave us a piece of land, or asset transferred that land, and £40,000 worth of Section 106 money. But that development was 900,000 in total to put that together. So we were able, from that 40,000 and that piece of land, to pull together the balance of that 900,000, some of which was through community share issue. So the community is bought in to the tune of £360,000. So I think looking at a diverse range of options, which you have done, can really lever in extra funding to come into Calderdale. So that's our positive. Where we were asked where we could do with some help from the council was with the empty properties. So we're in a situation where, for example, Jerusalem Farm, we've had a survey done on that to bring that back up to a decent home standard before we could let that out. Would cost about £35,000. So housing are really positive about us doing that. We're really positive about doing that. And council tax department are really positive about charging us council tax from the moment we sign the lease. And there's going to be a lead time between doing that and actually bringing it up to decent home standard. So I think our need is just to, maybe if there's some holistic communication across departments where we can come up with a holistic solution to that to help us achieve bringing this properties back into use, that would be really helpful. And that's my 2 points.
Yeah, well made. Thanks, Paul. I think that is worth, looking into. If the property is being developed, if it's empty but it's being developed, then surely, I don't know, is there scope for looking into waiving council tax? I don't know. Is that something that you've been looking into?
We've been trying, but it's actually the council tax, you get charged double or triple whilst you're in that period, which is even worse. So we were looking at, for us, it's quite a lot of money, £1,000 a month, whilst we go through that process. But we have asked, but we're still trying to get an answer. It's quite hard when you've got two different, departments have different objectives and different budgets.
I think, yeah, that might be a recommendation to make sure that they work together to provide a, you know, a more, something a bit easier for small organisations like that to get on with developing properties instead of putting barriers up. Right. Anybody questions for Paul? God, is it just going to be me asking questions all night? I'm sorry, you all know I've always got loads of questions I want to ask everyone. Paul, I was just really interested in the report that you put in. It talked about the work that you're doing with apprenticeships and working with the I've forgotten the name of it, the college. Oh yeah. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's exactly the way we want to go. And I just wondered if other housing associations would be able to sort of use that apprenticeship scheme as well to sort of learn the technologies that will, you know, benefit housing, you know, tenants as well as the housing providers.
There's quite a holistic approach to that. It's an idea at the moment, so we're working with the community college and they have their green building program. But there's a bigger picture in Todd related to the Todd Town deal funding, you know, to create this 21st century market town and have a journey from the school through to the college for a student, and then maybe moving to the enterprise centre, which is something that we're sponsoring, where they can then step into work either in the creation of that building or in the businesses that will be hosted in there. So yeah, just to have those links and communication.
That's fantastic. Who would like to go next? Yeah, great. Jeanette, please go ahead. You're from Together Housing.
Yeah, I'm Jeanette from Together Housing. I think following on from Paul's about apprentices in particular, we've been part of the Kickstart programme. So we've actually been able to, because New Ground, it was part of our charitable arm, have been able to access funding. That's the benefits of it. Access funding from outside the organisation. What it's done is brought opportunities for people to have experience within our sector and in our organisation. And what that's done is it's created jobs. So initially we had 63 and 20 of those have managed to get full-time placements within Together Housing on a variety of in terms of skills and areas of business, whether that's within grounds maintenance, whether that's an apprentice plumber. I think we've got lots of opportunities within our service areas, in our organisations, to support that entry level, to support people into work. And our priority has always been to get customers into work, our tenants into work. I mean, New Ground have been really successful, and in my presentation, I said that we've got about 245 people into work already, you know, this year. And what we've got is we've got a lot of information. We just need to use it much wisely. So therefore, we can target individuals that have either lost a job through, I mean, furlough for some, created redundancies. We could target those individuals to be able to get support in order to, particularly from New Ground, to get back and have transferable skills into other employment. It's been a really helpful and successful programme that we've run. I mean, obviously, my biggest ask at the moment is the amount of pressure that customers are under around household expenditure. I've never, in all my time in this sector, I don't think I've ever seen a more difficult time that customers are having at the moment, and I know that's happening nationally, and I know there's been some announcements from the spring statement yesterday, but I think I have never known at a time like this. And interesting, going back to Jenny's point around key choice, I've never known our properties being more popular. We can let anything anywhere, because people are desperate and people need homes. And you know what lockdown also brought for us is that breakup of relationships, breakup of families, where people want some independence. So it's brought much wider social issues. So therefore, in terms of the numbers will be increased. The numbers are increasing all the time, but demand's also increasing, which then really relates to us all up in our game in terms of delivering new development. And the opportunities on the local plan, for me, will bring them opportunities, and we need to do it quickly. Thanks.
Thanks ever so much. Anybody got any questions? Can I just ask about the voids? Because I know in the past they were they were sort of like, well, they were quite high. I know they were skewed slightly by the empty flats in Mixenden, but yeah, how are voids at the moment? What is the turnaround?
Yeah, in terms of turnaround for together, it's about, across our group, it's about 7%, which is about on 37,000 properties. It's significant. In Calderdale in particular, it's incredibly low, and it's the lowest it's been. We average about, in terms of turnover, about, God, I can't remember how many we've got in terms of numbers at the moment. We've got about 45 that are ongoing at any one time in terms of turnover. Some of that's natural turnover due to reasons for people leaving, and some of that's about death or transferring or moving on to different alternative accommodation. What I would say, Audrey, is that actually we can let anything. We've got a demand issue in terms of some stock that's not a viable stock. So sometimes we've got a lot of flats, as you know. In Calderdale, we've got 17 blocks of them, far too many. It's not always people's preference to live in a block of flats, and particularly when you've got family and you've got children. Block of flats aren't not the best accommodation. But what I would say is, it doesn't matter where we are at the moment, we're letting anything. And I don't know if that's going to be the same for the other RPs, and I see Angela's nodding, so I take it that's the same for them. In terms of people leaving and abandoning or evictions, our evictions across our group are at an all-time low. We've got 37,000 stock. We've done 4 evictions this year. And I think that's massive. We don't evict. It's about support and sustaining tenancies. And we've had 1 eviction in Calderdale, and that was a pre-COVID issue. There's been no other since then, because people are sustaining tenancies because they've nowhere else to go. And it's important for them to stay where they are and sustain what we can. So our enforcement has switched significantly from enforcement to support.
I think that is really good news. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a shame that we didn't have some of the houses that have been pulled down, because I think they could have been let out now, and we're waiting for the new builds. But that is really good news, and really great to hear about the evictions. Just in terms of the apprenticeships, how many of them are in Calderdale? Sorry, I'm very Calderdale focused.
And I get that, and I apologise for not having that information, but I will share it with you. And I think, because I think I'm doing a disservice when I talk about the numbers, because I think it's more than I've suggested, because I'm looking at some old figures. So I'll get that to you. So
yeah,
you've got that following.
Yeah, it's just an idea to get out.
I think absolutely right. And we've also got some ongoing new recruits coming in. So we really love apprentices, because I think it's a great entry level, and there's lots of different, like I say, different skill sets across our business that we can, whether it's academic or not. And I think for me that balance is really important. So yeah, I'll provide that so it can go into the minutes.
Thank you. Before I go on to Paul, would it be okay to go on to let Angela, because she's got her hand up? Yes, go on, Angela.
It was really just to obviously echo everything Janet's just said there. Janet, sorry, is it Janet? Sorry, yeah.
You can call me out, it's Janet.
Yeah, I mean, we don't obviously have a high level of stock at the minute in Calderdale. We've probably got about 550 properties. We've got 4 empty homes. It is absolutely ridiculous. And obviously we're incredibly proud of the development that we're doing over at Rasquith, and obviously the number of homes there, and the creation of the 30 apprenticeships that are locally in relation to that new scheme. And that's going to be a mix of shared ownership and social rented properties and right to rent to buy properties that we've got. I can give you the kind of breakdown on those numbers, but it is going back to that development opportunity. As an organisation, we're always looking out to see whether we can acquire more land to do more development on. So I think that if that's something we could look to maybe working more closely with the council on, that would be brilliant. But for us, as well as that, we've just had a senior leadership meeting today, and the concerns of the tenants, and we thought COVID was unprecedented times, but what we're looking at now from a financial perspective in relation to inflation, I mean, it's 7% at the moment. And obviously, you know, we're seeing a shift in those kind of impacts, really, because obviously from, you know, universal credit, we can look at getting APAs in place for people who are on universal credit, or some of our customers are covered by housing benefit, but self-payers are going to find this particularly challenging now moving forwards, because their incomes are not necessarily increasing, and the disposable income that tenants have that are, you know, on benefits, that they're particularly being challenged at the moment. We can only do so much, and we've not got at the minute the work. We put in extra resource into our money coaching team, we've put in extra resource into our tenancy coaching team. We're looking at developing a work and skills coordinator role, but that's across Yorkshire. It's not necessarily specific to Calderdale. So there's all kinds of things that we're looking at doing, but, you know, we're all going to be in the same boat, whether it's, you know, customers of a social landlord, or whether it's customers in the private sector or rented sector that are going to be facing those challenges. So it is, you know, if anything could be done to put some extra resource to provide that money management and help and support to tenants and residents living in the area, then I think that would be welcomed.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I'd just like to build on what Jeanette said. Before I worked here, I worked at Project Colt in Elland, so it was all about furniture and, you know, supporting people to furnish their homes with the basic stuff. And I worked with Michelle Ambler in welfare assistance on a daily basis almost, and Siobhan in the tenancy sustainability team, together, and also with Newground, who provided some financial support for us to create home starter packs. So I think the point I'm making is that the sum is greater than the parts when we actually communicate and we work together. So we'd have a person in need coming to us, and, you know, if they'd just come to us or just come to one person, they'd have merely got a sofa. But because we were all linked together, we could pool our resources and really help that person. And I think Calderdale could look a bit closer at that. It's sourcing items from community organisations rather than Argos and Dixon's and that type of thing, because that little bit of profit that the likes of Project Colt make on a new washer, a new fridge, goes back into doing more good. So it's just about working together. And Jeanette, it was brilliant. I used to love working with you lot.
Thanks, Paul. Steph?
I wanted to touch quickly on the new build element and trying to meet demand. Calderdale has struggled with housing numbers, and particularly on the affordable home side, we have seen through the efforts of our registered provider partners and people in my team, planning and others, a good increase now. We do have a healthy programme coming forward on the new build side. It's partly because of the partnership we've entered into with Together Housing Group, but many of the other RPs that are here today, like I said, they've all developed or developing at the moment. Increased grant rates from Homes England have helped that, make that possible, made sites more viable that perhaps weren't viable before. And as hopefully the local plan moves towards adoption, that will also help, you know, release the new sites. So at the moment, we've got over 500 new homes in our programme. We've not been in that position for a long time, and big schemes like the one that Together Housing completing on soon at Abbey Park, the one that Angela's referenced at Yorkshire Housing, they will help at scale, but we need to make sure we also cover across the borough, which all of our RPs are helping us do. And that's from anything from supported accommodation to specialist extra care accommodation. And we're actually managing to cover a lot of areas in the borough that we've not been able to do for a long time. So we should see a different picture in how we're helping to meet demand with the new build side over coming years.
Thank you. Councillor Lynn?
Yes, I wonder if I could just follow on from what Steph was saying. I'm a great believer in trying to get housing onto some of the derelict sites that we've got, the brownfield sites. Now, I realise that part of the problem about that is that it's difficult sometimes to make them stack up financially. You're going to have to spend more money on sorting out the site than you are actually going to be able to receive in the rents you're going to be able to charge, or the sales figures that you're going to get from shared ownership sales. So I suppose it's really just a plea, and I'm sure I know this will be something that Kate's and Sheila are very much on the ball about. But I know that, and I'm sure my own ward, Park Ward, isn't the only one where there are really still significant numbers of sites that could be made available. Perhaps not of the 260 homes or the 106 homes that we're doing at Beach Hill or whatever, but I mean, in my neck of the woods, the Connect Housing managed to build 7 houses on Hotwood Lane and 5 houses on West Home Road that have been incredibly popular. And so I suppose for me it's just a plea to say, is there any way we can get our hands on some of that brownfield sites money by kind of packaging some of the smaller sites up together, because quite often they're in areas where people actually want to live. There's a lot of demand in my ward for people want to live there because of the community connections, really, the family connections. So any way in which we could figure out how to package up some of those smaller previously industrial sites and get some decent money in so that it becomes viable for social housing providers to develop them would be brilliant. Thank you.
I'm just aware that we haven't heard really from Moss MSV, and we haven't heard from Horton Housing directly. Would it be wise to see if they've got anything to say before we take any further questions?
I'm happy to speak. Gudrun Carlisle from Horton Housing.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, so thanks for inviting me this evening. So Horton Housing is a specialist housing association. We do some development, but all our developments are aimed at, it's all temporary accommodation. So it's for people who are classed as vulnerable. So maybe young people who are homeless, people with drug and alcohol addictions, or as you heard, people who are experiencing rough sleeping. And I just wanted to pick up on something I think it was Councillor Lynn was saying regarding the waiting times. We really feel this is a temporary housing provider. It's because we have to move people on, and finding good sustainable accommodation that people can move on to is very, very difficult. And most of the people that we're working with, they are in the higher bands, the gold bands. I would say I understand everybody here is very focused on Calderdale, and quite rightly so, but I work across West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire, and I think Calderdale's doing really well. Some of the waiting lists I see in other areas, people are never going to get housed. It's just not going to happen. And just so one of the things that we've been doing in Calderdale that I think particularly proud of is working with people who are in recovery. Well along the journey in recovery from drug and alcohol addictions, and we've provided them with work on the same level as all our other staff that are working with us, and that's been so successful. The connections they're able to make with some of our tenants has been really good, and such a dedicated group of people, such hard workers. And we are also looking, as other people have said, to expand our programme and our offer to apprentice. We don't have many at all in Calderdale at the moment, but that's certainly something we're looking to do.
Thank you.
And we don't have any voids ever, hardly ever. In-out is kind of the way we operate. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody like to ask Gudrun any questions?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yes, go on.
I've got my hand up.
Well,
I'm going back to what Councillor Lynn was saying about brownfield land. There is quite a lot of brownfield land within North Halifax, Ovendene, and Illingworth, Mixendin. So I'm just making everyone aware of that, although I'm sure you already are. but please get something done with them as soon as you can. It's really needed.
And other staff, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to touch on the brownfield queries, so I can cover that. It is really difficult to get development going on brownfield sites. We've seen it at Beach Hill, where the tower blocks were. It's taken a number of years to get us to the position we're in, which is a really good position now, but it's taken, you know, perseverance and waiting for the right funding opportunities to come up. Calder Valley Community Land Trust, they're going through it at the moment. So the current programmes, the Brownfield Housing Fund, which is administered by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, it is a very technical and rigorous process to get through. And if you're looking at smaller sites, it is a tremendous amount of effort to secure what is an average of around £10,000 per home, which on a brownfield site, it just gets sucked up very quickly. So we are, my team supports where we can to either private developers or housing associations with the Brownfield Housing Fund application process. We're supporting a number to go through on our own sites as well. And they've just done another call for projects. So we're back out trying to look for new sites again. Delivery timescales are incredibly difficult as well. And the Brownfield Housing Fund is the only programme available at the moment to help top up and try and provide a bit of support there. The North Halifax, we have got some really exciting work going on there. So the council-owned sites at Furness Avenue, Turner Avenue, and Clough Lane and Mixenden. They're out.
That's the ones I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, we've tried before and we're trying again. So we're out to tender at the moment. So there's not too much I can say, but we're hoping to have a developer partner identified by early summer. And
good news.
Coming back to Cabinet in summer with a proposal for how we will work with one partner to bring forward these sites with the community, working with them on designs and making sure that, you know, they do integrate into the existing community and, you know, contribute to that. So we are trying. It doesn't matter if it's a small site or a large site. A lot of them have exactly the same issues and challenges. But we do know that, you know, we need to bring them back into use as well.
Thank you. Can I just point out, particularly the one on Turner Avenue South? I think that's where I'm thinking of. It already has such things as roads, so it must have sewage and it must have electricity, cables, etc., etc. So would that not be an advantage rather than a disadvantage for the brownfield?
Sometimes, and I might look at my RP colleagues to help me a bit here with this one, but I know from the work we did on the Furness Avenue site that if the drains aren't in the right place, if the utilities aren't in the right place, it costs a lot of money to divert them. So if they're in the right place, yeah, and it's much easier than trying to bring in new connections into, you know, some sites that are perhaps a bit more rural, but they can be a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I suppose I would just wanted to quickly ask, possibly Kate, about the homes in the sky above the market. Are they're going to be brought into use, certainly, hopefully, with the new town fund for Halifax? Is that right?
I'm not sure that it is, Councillor Smith. So Halifax has future high streets funding.
Yes.
But I'm not certain that the renovations around streets in the sky are included within that. I know that certainly it's been looked at before in terms of what their potential use could be. I know there was discussion, wasn't there, at one point in terms of a hotel. But I'm not certain. Sheila, are you up to speed on that? I'm sorry to not give you a definitive answer, but I don't think that the full funding is in there. Maybe some pipeline funding.
Yeah, so I think Steph has the detail on that in terms of looking at. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I'm Sheila O'Neill, Director of Regeneration. I joined late and I've had my camera off. So yes, Steph, I don't know if you want to provide more detail around the opportunities we're exploring. And as we've talked about before, it is about having that menu of tools and interventions and approaches, working with partners just to try and pick off what we can where, whether it's small numbers or hopefully some of the bigger numbers that will come forward through the local plan. I'll just let Steph update you on the houses in the sky.
Not too much at the moment, but my team's trying to assemble some funding that will allow us to update the feasibility work and cost plans that were done as part of the wider market stuff, so be able to focus more on the homes and how they can be brought back into use. So it is something that we've not forgotten about, and it's something that we are trying to do again. I think something we're trying to generally get better at is making our sites investment ready. So even if the right funding package isn't available now, having the information available, so when Brownfield Housing Fund, for example, or others come available, that we have the information ready to be able to submit our bids.
Thanks, Steph. I'll maybe get some more information about that later. Does anybody, Steph, Councillor Clark, you've got your hand up?
I'm sorry, no.
No?
I'll lower.
Anybody else? No? Just one last thing, going back quite a bit, really. Oh, Councillor Regan. Yes, Regan Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's more for Together Housing, I think. Field Lane Estate, of course, large number of the 2-bedroom maisonettes, and I usually find about half a dozen tend to be voided. Just wondering, what is the main demand really on Together Housing in terms of the sort of accommodation that people are looking for? I'm also wondering about the sort of how much investment is generally required to bring those maisonettes up to scratch. I mean, is it a case of that? Yeah, they need redecorating and maybe some wider works doing on a regular basis in anticipation of new tenants, because sometimes the gaps of them being empty seem to be quite long.
Maybe not as long as it used to be. I think Councillor Smith alluded earlier that Together had an issue with empty homes previously, but not anymore. In terms of turnover, our turnovers about averaging about 14 days that they're empty. But depending on obviously who's moved out and what the work is or remedial work needs to be done to bring the property up to standard. In terms of an empty home, I think at the moment it's an average cost of about £4,000. And if I'm really honest with you, that's probably not enough to set somebody up properly. And we are looking at our empty homes plan now around whether or not we do extra. So making sure we put flooring down, or do we do a little bit of decorating? So we are looking at making that standard a little bit higher. In terms of empty homes across the board, I've already said actually we can let anything, but what I would say is I don't know whether it's since the pandemic or not, people want properties and houses, they want gardens, they don't necessarily want flats. So that's the key thing really. And in terms of what I said before, we've got a significant amount of high rise, but I never even went into low rise. We've got a significant amount of flats across the borough. So if you think about 10,000 stock that we've got, at least 51% of those are flats. So that's why, I think if we're going to when we do development, we need to build the right sort of property that's long-term, it's got long-term sustainability, and also it's what people want to live in. You and I, or anybody on this call, you choose to live in what you want to live in, and actually more people want, that garden, they want some outdoor space, because actually, after people have lived through the pandemic, living in the high-rise block and living in a low-rise block, it's been really challenging for some of our customers and has caused quite detrimental impact on health and mental health because they haven't got the outdoor space.
No,
so
sure.
I think, so I do think, to be honest, we've got lots to do about that going forward, and it has changed how we look at what we need in terms of properties going forward, in terms of the development process going forward and planning.
Yeah, I mean the maisonettes have gardens front and back. One belongs to, as it were, to one and then to the other. So there is that potential there. But I take on board your point about high rise and everything else like that. That's very clear that there's going to be an amenity need of some form or another. Chair, if I may, I have another question as well. I think it's going to be for Paul, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And then Councillor Shazad's got a question as well. So that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's you, Paul. It was with regard to the Hebdom Bridge development on. Hang on a second, let me just put it up on the report there. Is that the right one?
High Street.
The 20 homes on the high streets, costing 4.5 million. That works out at £225,000 per house. I mean, what's the basis of that to making that affordable? Is it sort of part equity sort of arrangements, or is there another deal there?
No, it's going to be a lot more than 4.5 million now, since the recent events. Prices have gone up 25% on building projects, so that's a whole other issue. The package of funding for that will be a partnership with Connect Housing. So at the end of that project, the plan is that Connect will build them. We will own the land, and then we'll purchase 10 of those houses from Connect, and they'll retain Connect. Connect will retain 10 of those, and they'll all be for affordable rent. We'll be looking at funding from Homes England. We've secured, or in the process of securing, brownfield housing funding from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. There may be a community share issue. It's going to be a package of things to make it stack up, but it's definitely about affordable rented accommodation in perpetuity.
Right. Yeah, I think it was that. I think because a lot of focus on the notion of affordable housing tends to be focused on freehold rather than affordable rent. So yeah, that answers the question really. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shazad.
From my understanding, future high street funding has been mentioned. We tend to have a lot of shops which are empty. Then you have second, third floor, which is completely empty. It's never been used for anything. And not be used as a short-term accommodation use when there's a dire need for accommodation. Is there a possibility for something like that? Because we are in a situation where there is less accommodation available in Calderdale. Can we make use of those empty places above shops, like second, third floors, or maybe short-term accommodation, overcome the shortage that we have? But it all comes back to the funding element. What if the owner can't afford? Do we have funding? Will there be funding through future high street funding? Question mark.
I think Steph, do you want to come in?
There's no existing funding to support the conversion of space above shops. Calder Valley Community Land Trust looking at, as I've said, one of the schemes in Hebdom for that. And my team's considering how we can try and do that at the borough market houses. But one of the examples from the borough market is how, some of the tenancies, particularly with the shops, include the full unit, and there's complications, not easy to resolve those tenancy issues sometimes, and also how you divide it up. So they're quite complex, a bit unknown for my team, so that's why we're spending a bit of time trying to unpick it. But there's no funding available as such, other than perhaps through Homes England if you're a registered provider. But we can definitely see where there's capacity to try and bring spaces like that back into use.
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of, there is a dire need for accommodation. Short-term accommodation, this might be useful for us. I know it's expensive, just getting the funding, wherever from, lottery funding, central government, whichever source you can get the funding from, which will, this will alleviate the shortage in accommodation. That's my thinking anyway.
Right, good points. Paul, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know one example where that has worked, Councillor Shazad. CLT I visited last year, they were trying to buy a pub and convert that into affordable housing, but they were outbid by a pub company. But what happened after that, the pub came back into use and was successful, but the pub company wasn't using the top floor. So they went back to the CLT and said, look, we can give you the top floor if you can bring it into use. So they were able to secure funding to create housing above that. It's quite a unique situation, but with the right landlord, you never know.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I suppose we are coming to the end of this discussion, and I'd like to thank you, but I'd also like to ask just one more question. Together, because that's the company I know most of, I know there are a lot of there are sort of houses that people don't even know about, and I wonder. I know that some of them have been sort of mothballed with the idea of knocking them down, and I just think at this moment in time, is it not possible for Together to rethink the strategy and sort of bring some of them back? And the ones I've got in mind are the Rishworth flats. I mean, they haven't been let for ages, but I'm thinking about the cost of new build. Can't we use and promote what's there? I know that they were, I haven't seen inside them, so I don't know what condition they're in, but it just feels like there are opportunities to use some of these buildings.
Yeah, I think that's a fair challenge. I think we've looked at these properties before. We've got a strategic investment group that we look at properties where they need a significant amount of work, and actually because of the amount of work that's required, because of either external issues that have impacted on the building inside, or actually the building is no longer viable. I mean, the properties you're talking about there are really tiny inside, incredibly tiny, only for one person, and actually wasn't very popular based on the fact of where they were. They only attracted older people, but not near a shop, you know, quite an elevated position to get to in terms of getting it from the road, from the bus, so no bus route. So there are lots of reasons why that area wasn't very successful. However, what I would say is that it's got some prime land around there that we need to really probably knock down and build. And one of the things our board is pushing constantly is around making sure that we make decisions a bit quicker, so they're not stood empty for a long time, making sure that we make the right decision for a particular area, and that we move and do something about it pretty quickly. The complexity about Rishworth in that one in particular is we've got a lot of right to buy. So therefore, it makes anything around doing development quickly really challenging, because it would mean me having the discussion with owner-occupiers potentially about moving people out or buying properties back through, whether it's either by agreement or through a CPO. And that's a lot of work and a lot of challenge. And it's controversial. We've done it in other areas. We did it at Abbey Park, and we've done it in different areas, and it's been okay. But actually, is that the right thing for that particular area? So those I suppose those decisions are really challenging, and they take time because it's really complex. But what I think we should be really clear about is we shouldn't be spending money on properties that are not viable, and we need to be brave about that. But what I think we probably need to do is explain that properly, and particularly explain it properly to people who live and are still in that community, so they don't think we've walked away, mothballed it, and it's okay, and that it's going to be left like that for a long time. We need to be much more upfront about that community discussion and communication, and that individual community around where that is. And as you know, for there it's flats and houses, so it's an incredibly complex place. I think what you'll find less and less of those sort of things happening now Together, in terms of us being much more robust about and we know the demands there around empty homes. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does in part, I suppose. Yeah, I'm aware of lots of developments that, like Soby Bridge off Cho Lane is one that's been, I'd really like to have a chat with you outside of this about that, just to find out what's happening. Right, can I just say thank you to everyone for coming along. It's been I hope you agree, it's been a really interesting discussion, and yeah, facing the challenges. I mean, I'd like to recommend that we look at Paul's query on paying council tax at such a high rate when a property's when a small company such as CLT is trying to bring it back into use. Mike, you've got your hand up. I've done something wrong.
No, Chair. No, on the contrary. I think that's a really helpful recommendation. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I just wondered whether the board would be happy with the suggestion that I pull together a sort of a brief edited highlights report so we can actually capture some of the comments that different people have made and just have a little more I don't know publicity than for this issue than we normally get at the end. Nothing big and grand, but just to capture some of the key. I know they're in the minutes, but the minutes are a particular. I don't think Diane does great minutes. I'm not sure many people read. And I also, secondly, I want to add my thanks because everyone's made a real effort to come here this evening. And thirdly, probably a work programme item is that we haven't focused very much in the past on private sector rented housing, and I think that's where a lot of people, some of the poorer housing is, and some of the more vulnerable people are, and maybe the board would like to consider having a look at that in the next municipal year. I've finished, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. So if I make that recommendation, who do we ask? Do we ask Cabinet to have a look at the possibility of changing the awarding of council collection of council tax at 3 times the ordinary rate for empty homes that are being redeveloped?
You could do it that way, or you could ask officers to look at it in the first instance, and if that didn't work, then go back to Cabinet.
Sorry, Councillor Benton, you've got your hand up.
Just a couple of questions to the lady from Halton Housing, if possible. How long do the tenants generally stay in that? And do they go on to find secure accommodation afterwards, long term? Are they helped, with all your groups?
Yeah, so the length of stay is very variable. It can be as little as 2 to 4 months, or it can be up to 2 years in some cases. Maybe even a little bit longer if we're struggling to find accommodation for people to move on to. But yes, really more or less right from the start of somebody moving in, we are gently nudging them towards and helping them to look for sustainable accommodation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second your recommendation because I really think in the case of Calder Valley Community Land Trust, if they've taken over 2 properties, I presume Paul's talking about the 2 properties in the Hebdom Bridge. If that's the case, and the council tax people want to charge them for it when they're doing the property up, I don't think that's on at all. So I think we should have a word in the right places there, Aldrin. I'll second your recommendation, and Mike can send it on to the relevant department and find out, as long as you'll get a reply back, and hopefully it'll be a positive one. Thank you.
Sheila, are you coming in on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very quickly, Steph will take that issue away and speak to our empty homes officer, but just to confirm that the policy that has been adopted by the council on the empty homes premium, new owners of empty homes can apply for that to be repaid so long as they bring that property back into use and habitation within 1 year of acquiring the property. So there are measures in place for what the council has to do is try and protect from people who acquire properties cheaply or from other places and then don't bring them back into the use. I accept that most of our registered provider partners and certainly the CLT would not be in that category. But I think it's worth us looking at the process and making sure that it's as seamless as possible, because the last thing we want is our officers and the officers working to bring houses back into use to be wasting time having conversations that they don't need to have.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sheila. And I totally agree. I mean, I totally support the council tax for empty homes in a general sense. So that would be definitely a conversation worth having. Dave? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to leave it with Steph to look at, to find out what the situation is at the moment and find out what the best course of action would be after that. Right, okay, well, this time it really is goodbye. Thank you very, very much. Do not feel you have to stay if you don't want to, but I really appreciate all the input. It's been an interesting evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you
Angela,
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Gudrun, Paul. Right, thank you very much. So now we're moving on to the next item, which is transport services. Andrew, would you like to introduce it?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, if I can just say a few words by way of introduction, and then I'll hand over to Phil Taylor, who's the Council's Transport Services Manager. And Phil, together with Fazana, I think are going to deliver a short presentation, which hopefully will bring to life the brief report that we circulated with the agenda. There's lots of photographs and things like that on it, so hopefully you'll find that useful. But we were keen to bring this item forward as I certainly think transport services is one of the lesser known council functions, and most members probably never really come across it unless family or friends use the service or constituents seek assistance with things like home to school transport appeals. It may be low profile, but it is incredibly important, and it underpins the delivery of many other services and wider aspirations of the council. For example, our minibus fleet, which Phil will talk about in a bit more detail, makes thousands of journeys a year. It transports some of the most vulnerable members of society, children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, to schools and colleges, and frail older people to day centres. And our team of mechanics, which is quite a small team, and again, Phil will fill in a bit of the detail, ensure that the council's fleet of vehicles of all shapes and sizes, everything from small vans right through to some of the bigger vehicles we have out on the road, are maintained to a high standard of safety and reliability. And because those vehicles are so essential to so many of the services that we as a council deliver, particularly the sort of universal public facing services that we provide in neighbourhoods, it's really important that the vehicles are operational and they're out on the road as much as possible, not sitting in the garage. And that's something that our team managed to achieve. So I'll pass over to Phil, who'll no doubt elaborate on what I've said, but he'll also be able to highlight some of what we think are achievements of the service, but also some of the challenges that we face going forward with this service. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Phil, over to you and Fazana.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Phil Taylor, Transport Services Manager, and I'm based at Battington Road along with the team. Thank you, Fazana. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm Phil Taylor, Transport Services Manager, and the service is based at Battington Road in central Halifax. And I've just done a few slides just to give a quick overview of what the transport services do and what the services that we provide to the general public. So transport services is split into two separate elements. And the first one that we're going to look at here is the transport operations, which focuses and looks after and manages all aspects of our home to school transport, and then also delivers some, but not all, of our adult day centre transport for our adult social care clients. So in brief, what the transport operations team do is to assess applications for free to homeschool transport. Now, every child or every pupil who resides in Calderdale is able to apply for free to home to school transport, and the team assess that against our two policies. The first one, which is a statutory home to school transport policy, which is for all pupils under the age of 16, or up to the age of 16 rather, and then the non-statutory element of the home to school transport is our post-16 policy. They assess the applications against both policies or the relevant policy, and then for those who are unsuccessful with their application, then there is an appeals process, and that is a two-stage appeal. The first stage, which is an informal stage, which myself as service manager has the can provide discretion, or if it's still unsuccessful after the first stage, then it goes to a more formal second stage appeal rather, which is in front of an independent appeals panel. And it before COVID, it used to be at the town hall, but now it's being done over Teams. For those who are eligible for free to home school transport, then there are a number of different ways which transport can be offered. And the team can commission through an external transport provider. And the majority of the commissioning is done through an agreement that we have with West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And they will commission and tender for mainstream school services. And the providers in Calderdale is predominantly First. So the double-decker buses that you see with the name of a school on there, which is a dedicated service, so i.e. it's no members of the public can use those services, that is commissioned through the transport operations team via WICA. Other external transport providers, which is increasingly growing, is the use of taxis. They also provide an in-house transport service, which is for our special educational needs and disability pupils and for our adult social care users. And the previous two there, the external and the in-house transport, is predominantly where we're seeing the highest pressure on the transport budget. We have increased demand, particularly in the SEND pupils. So there is more and more pupils that are acquiring a education, health and care plan. And out of that education, health and care plan comes the transport to the school. This is increasing in numbers from 2014, when the transport budget was centralised, and it hasn't seen any movement in the budget, but the increase has gone massive. It's gone through the roof. The responsibility from this academic year, we have just about nearly 1,400 pupils per day that we're transporting. So that's both through mainstream and through our SEND internal transport. And then we have an independent travel training service, which is part of this transport operations. We have two trainers. One of them is based at Ravenscliffe Special School, and he trains students there for what we would probably take for granted, of being able to stand at a bus stop and being there on time, having bus fares, etc. if they need that, or having the right ticket or having the right change, and then making them be more prepared for just general, more independent living. And then the other transport trainer who works with a lot of year 6 to year 7 transition pupils, and there's quite a big saving that we can make by doing this work in order to train the pupils being able to get ready to go to secondary school and how to go there. This next slide is just a quick view of the transport operations fleet. Predominantly minibuses, which you can see there with the services to schools graphics, and the different colours represent the schools that they are going to. So the red one that you can see in the photograph there matches the red uniform of Woodbank, and the blue and the purple is for Ravenscliffe, and then we also have green, which matches Highbury. So you should be able to see, when you see these vehicles travelling on the road, you probably have a good idea where they're going to go to. And sorry, just go back one, Fazana, I haven't finished on that one. Thank you. It's not all minibuses there, so we've got some smaller vehicles which are people carriers, which is the one in the middle there, and then we also have on the far left Ford Pumas, which are electric hybrid vehicles, and these vehicles are used more or less 24 hours a day, because we share them with the home care service, who are out in the middle of the night looking after our vulnerable elderly people. Thank you, Fazana. The transport operations team and resources, we have the 66 vehicles, which, like I said, predominantly minibuses. The staffing has increased. So from when I first started in transport services, we needed 103 driver and passenger attendants. And because of the pupil increase and the vehicle increase that we've needed, we now need 140 drivers and passenger attendants with the 3 team leaders to deliver our statutory service. The photograph there is the Transport Operations Office. So these are the colleagues that do the assessments of application and the commissioning of transport, and they also schedule all the runs that we have, which underneath there is one of our vehicles with one of our drivers and passenger attendants in their Calderdale uniform. And that operation covers 6:45 in the morning till 6:45 in the evening. So we operate on two shifts. Thank you, Fazana. This is a list of all the schools that we transport to on a daily basis. And what I wanted to highlight there, which is in green, is all the schools that are not in Calderdale. So out of the 66 schools that we transport to, 35 are out of borough. And I just give you a quick indication there. If you can see on the right hand side, the second to bottom that's highlighted in green is a school in Chorley. That costs, that's for one child who lives in Calderdale. So it's a taxi that we transport him to, from Calderdale to Chorley and back home every day, and that's at costing the transport budget over £25,000 per year. And that's just an example. You can see quite a few there that are in Oldham, some in Wakefield, Rochdale, and they're all similar sort of prices. So this is where the transport services budget is going, and why the costs are increasing. Thank you, Fazana. So that was transport services. That was a brief of transport services. The other part of transport services is vehicle services. The vehicle services is the part of the service that looks after the council's fleet. So all the vehicle servicing and the reactive maintenance and proactive maintenance is done in our workshop, and also the same with our plant, and that's our grass machinery and our mowers, tractors, etc. that's used for our green spaces and street scene service. Vehicle services manages the fleet. We use a fleet management software system, so we can be able to show all the maintenance that's been done on every single vehicle that's in the fleet. We've got all the costings of the fleet, how many tyres it's had, etc. And we can also manage the fuel for the vehicles as well. So on site in Battington Road Depot, we have 80,000 litres of diesel, with a further 20,000 litres that's stored at Ainley's Depot in Elland. We provide an MOT service. We MOT all our own vehicles, plus we also MOT private vehicles as well as taxis. And the taxi compliance test is also carried out by transport services team and the vehicle services team. And finally, we have the driver training and familiarization. So we have our own trainer. He will provide a familiarization for every single driver that we have on the fleet, We'll also make sure that we carry out an assessment for those drivers and a health check and a license check to make sure that everybody's safe to drive a council vehicle. Thank you, Fazana. Again, this is just another visual for the vehicle services side. So on the left-hand side there is the workshop. It's quite a small workshop. We can fit in about 6 or 7 vehicles at any one time. And the vehicle on the ramp that you can see there is about as large a vehicle as we can take in that workshop. So anything that was to be larger, like HGVs, etc., we would have to outsource the maintenance for that because we don't have the infrastructure to be able to cope with those types of vehicles. The largest vehicle that we have on our fleet is we've got 2 sweepers, which they weigh 15 tons. And we have a maintenance contract with our provider for those sweepers, for them particular 2 vehicles. The next largest vehicles that we have on the fleet is the one that's on the top right there, which is used by our highways maintenance team that repair the potholes, etc. And they're at 7.2 tons. And in the middle there's the, I know Councillor Smith wanted to see the Mayor's Cast, and unfortunately it was out. And there it is, it's on charge. And at the bottom there, the mini sweepers. So they're just some of the different types of vehicles that we have on the fleet that we procure and we maintain. And I just wanted to just talk a little bit about where we're going with our fleet and what the intentions are with the zero carbon Calderdale logos that we have on our electric vans. We have 30 of these electric vans, which make up 15% of our fleet, which might sound low, but in comparison with some of the other councils, and I won't mention Leeds because they're flying way high above us, but we aren't doing bad in comparison with some of our other local authority colleagues. Some of them don't have any electric vehicles, but we do intend to have 100% electric fleet by the year 2030, and to get there we're not quite ready yet. And in the photographs that are on the slide there, it shows some of the electric charging infrastructure that we have in and around Calderdale now. And the one that's the white charger that's on the wall, and then we can see at the bottom there's a post charger next to the electric vehicle. We have 30 electric vehicles and we have 30 different chargers, and these chargers provide a very slow trickle charge that would give a vehicle's battery 0 to 100% in about 7 or 8 hours. So they're overnight chargers and they work fantastically well for the vans that we have on the fleet. But to get to for the larger vehicles, like the one that I showed you in the previous slide, and where our home to school transport minibuses are parked, which are parked in a very small space, this type of charging infrastructure is not going to work. So the work that we're doing now in transport now is to do some research and looking at what sort of infrastructure that we need across Calderdale to be able to make that next step by the next round of procurement, which is going to be in around about 2025 through to 2030. So the default that we want to be looking at now for every new vehicle that is added to the fleet is to have electric. And just finally, I just wanted to just talk about the photograph that is on the right, which says vehicle to grid. This is in Battington Road Depot, and the way that this charger works is that if an electric vehicle is used and at the end of the day it has, say, for argument's sake, it has 50% left in its battery, that's plugged into that vehicle to grid charger, and the remaining battery that's left in the vehicle is then transferred back into the building, and it can be used by the building. So the vehicle will be empty and be drained completely of its charge, and then when the electricity is cheap, or cheaper, should I say, in the early hours of the morning, it's recharged again, so it will be fully 100% ready for the next morning's use. And we are one of the, we may be the only council, I'm not sure, but we're certainly the first council in England to take part in this trial with Eon and Nissan. So this is a trial period of how this vehicle to grid works. Thank you, Fazana. And thank you very much. That's just a quick whistle-stop tour of transport services, and happy along with Andrew to take any questions.
Yep, thank you very much. And as you say, we were really lucky, Councillor Shazad and I, to go around the depot with you, and it was very, very interesting. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. The question for Phil. I was a bit concerned when that chart of all the out of Calderdale schools where some of our children are sent to. Are they properly specialised schools, which they can't, and are those schools not available within Calderdale?
Thank you, Councillor Young. That's a fantastic question. Yes, they are specialist schools, and transport services is not the service that is responsible for placing children in schools. Yeah. That is done in children and young people services at the SEN team. Now, the one in Chorley, I would personally challenge that placement, although the school is probably a fantastic school and is probably the absolute right school for that particular child. And as a transport manager, it's not my business to challenge that particular element. But what is my challenge is there another school that is closer than Chorley that can still meet that child's needs? It doesn't have to be the best school. I'm not disputing that the school at the child is probably the best school. I'm not disputing that. I'm disputing, is there a school that is closer than Chorley? And that is work that it's ongoing work that we're doing with Children and Young People Service. And what I'm asking them to do is, if there is a school that is closer, so it could be the parent that wanted this school and was absolutely adamant, and they quite rightly have a big say in where their child is placed. But what we can do is, on the education, health and care plan, is we can ask our colleagues in Children and Young People Service to name the schools that are closer that can also meet the needs of that child. And then it would be the responsibility of the parent to pay for the transport to the school that they choose, i.e. Chorley. So if we had a school, in argument's sake, in Todmorden that could meet that child's needs, but the parent didn't want to send them there, they wanted to continue to go to Chorley, then we would ask the SEN team to consult with the school in Todmorden to make sure that it could meet the child's needs, and then enter it on the appropriate place in the education, health and care plan. And that way, then we don't have to provide the transport. The parent would be responsible for transporting their own child.
Right, thank you, Phil.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Benton.
Hi, yes, a question for Phil. Just regarding the MOT situation, how many sort of either quarterly, 6 monthly or yearly do you do MOTs on private vehicles? And what sort of income does that generate?
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Yeah, to be honest with you, it's not something that we advertise and do a lot of, purely because it would be taking away a vehicle technician away from our own fleet. So our own fleet is predominantly what we want to concentrate on. So we do give a few staff will use Calderdale Council staff users, friends of Calderdale staff users, but it's not something that we particularly market.
Right, so, it's not advertised.
Not really. But I mean,
okay.
if you wanted to have your vehicle MOT there, then absolutely we'll make room for you.
Thank you.
Anybody? Could I ask the question, Phil? You mentioned when we were talking yesterday about the bursaries. Are these available now, the school bursaries that because I have a bit of a problem, because I sort of think of children and young people as they should be entitled to free transport, but I can see that it costs a huge amount of money. But you mentioned about a contribution from a bursary that for some young people over the age of 16. How can we sort of promote that? How can we, is there anything that you can do that can try and make that work in our favour in terms of financing some of the services?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the statutory part of homeschool transport is the pre-16 transport, the pre-16 pupils, and then the post-16 pupils is a non-statutory part. And at the moment we are giving some free transport to some of our vulnerable post-16 students, but there's a I think it's been presented at Cabinet on Monday about the changes in the post-16 policy. And the funding for post-16 policy is paid directly from government to the schools in the form of the post-16-19 bursary funding. And vulnerable students and students from low-income families can claim up to £1,200 per year directly through their school or their education provider. And that funding there is to pay for things like transport, or for meals, or for any educational equipment that they might need to do the course that they're on. So the funding doesn't get paid to the local authorities for post-16 transport. It's paid directly to the schools. But what we're asking under the new policy is for a contribution to be made. So we're not asking for the vulnerable students to pay the amount to cover the transport, i.e. if they're going to Chorley, we're not asking for £20,000. We're asking for a contribution of £315 per year, which is the same amount of what a mainstream pupil would pay for a concessionary bus pass available from Metro. Does that answer your question, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I mean, and that wouldn't impact on them it wouldn't impact them directly. It would be just using something that's there to be used for travel.
It's there for them now, yeah, and it's been there for a long number of years. How well it's publicised by schools, I can't say, but it's definitely something that we will be directing any post-16 applicants to the schools to say, have you claimed your bursary? In fact, under the new proposed policy, it's something that we won't accept an appeal for until they've had they've applied for the bursary through the school.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to elaborate on that. The way I see this at the moment is that basically what's happening is people are not claiming the transport costs through the bursary scheme, because basically the local authority is paying the costs. So what we're actually saying is that we want people to use that bursary funding to pay for the transport, and the way that we do that is by us making, as Phil says, it's important this is a contribution. For most people that won't cover the full cost of their transport. There will be some subsidy from the authority, but make that contribution and then claim that back through the bursary process. So it should be a cost neutral effect on the individual families, basically.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question, because I was lucky enough to go on the visit yesterday, which was really helpful and informative. So thanks to Phil for that. Members, I mean, in the last item and in other items, are interested in apprenticeships, Phil, and you talked to us a little bit about apprenticeships yesterday. And I think the other thing that I observed, because it was I'm no expert, but it's a tight, small site in many respects, and is shared with the Suez fleet. So that was something that I don't think you'd mentioned, but I think it's worth pointing out to members as well. Finished.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, it was very busy and very interesting. Anybody got any other questions? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to say that I would have liked to have gone today. Unfortunately, I can't because I've got COVID, so I'm quite glad about Zoom. I have to say that I've got some sort of interest, although it's not pecuniary. But I have members of family that are passenger assistants, and I was not aware that there were so many of them actually. Hundreds of them, well, not quite, but quite a lot. And I have been up when I was on the fly tipping jaunt that I did, and it is quite a small, compact site, and I can't see anywhere to expand it either. It's really in a built-up area, isn't it? Are you thinking that you will need more space?
If it's for the charging infrastructure, what I'm thinking of is perhaps developing what they call a rapid charger hub across various sites in Calderdale. And this is going to be one of the options that I think we're going to be exploring in a bit more detail. And that would look like a bit like a petrol station, if you like. And instead of having diesel pumps, it will have chargers that the vehicles will be able to pull up to. And instead of charging overnight, which is what they do now with the vans, they charge in about 30 to 40 minutes. So yes, it does take a little bit longer than filling up with diesel, but it's what it's going to be. Unless technology changes, because it is changing so quickly. But that is what we're probably going to have to look at. So we're probably going to have to find somewhere in that small compact site to be able to put some rapid chargers in there in the sort of shape of a fuel forecourt, if you like, for want of better expression.
Thank you. Can I just ask another question about the vehicle to grid device?
Yeah.
Have you just got the one at the moment? Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a trial.
It is. It's on trial.
Yeah. And do you find that it works well?
Well, it charges brilliantly.
Yeah.
What the effect is of how much electricity it's putting back into the building and what savings it's going to give. This is all part of the 3-year trial, and it's been administered by E.ON. So E.ON provided the charger for us free of charge. We just had to pay for the installation. But at the end of the trial, we should be able to give some really good, accurate information about what the benefits are. And if there are some good benefits to it, then I think it would be wise for us to invest in some, as long as it's given us the saving that we're looking for.
Another comment about the vehicle to grid thing. When you say that it goes into the building,
yeah.
If you're doing that overnight, what benefit does that have? But I don't quite understand going back into the building.
Yeah, it's just
to do the lights and.
Yes, that is exactly it. Yeah. It's electricity that we can utilize back in, like you said, in the lights or whatever we need the electricity for.
Yeah.
And then the recharges again when the electricity is at a cheaper rate, so it'll start charging again at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
So it's not unlike solar panels that, yeah.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question about the savings? I mean, we heard last night at council about the huge savings that LED lighting has made the council. Would this be a similar sort of invest to save idea? I mean, because the hub thing again at council, we Colin Hutchinson spoke about one of the cheapest rates is just charging your car overnight from domestic electricity, and a lot of the vehicles aren't used overnight. So why would we need to invest in really high cost sort of charging ports where we could use sort of domestic style charging to drip feed overnight?
The answer to that one is simply is the space that we have So in the slides, I showed you the posts that we have and the wall charges. And those are the trickle feed overnight charges. Well, to provide 170 more of them, we just don't have the physical space in Battington Road.
Yeah.
So the rapid charges would be also to keep services operational as well, so they're not relying on overnight charges that we couldn't provide. There are some rapid charges that are available across Calderdale for the public to use, and we do have an account with them, so some of the fleet vehicles are using those rapid charges as well. So, and they are a good backup for us as well, because if one of the things about driving an electric vehicle is drivers can get what they call range anxiety, which if the battery is starting to run low and they've still got another couple of hours left of work to do, then they can pop onto one of these rapid charges that's in the public car parks, give 10 minutes more charge, and that will get them through to the end of the day until they can plug back into the overnight charger. So that's how it works. So the rapid charges don't necessarily need to go from 0 to 100% every time they're used.
No.
Yeah, they only might need 10 minutes.
Steph, did you have another question? No. I did have another question about the yeah, it is kind of how many electric vehicles did you say we had? Sorry, I should remember this from the visit.
30.
Right, 30. So that there isn't enough space even at the moment to just do the overnight feed for the 30 vehicles that you've got.
Yeah. So the 30 are all taken care of. We've got the overnight. We've got 30 overnight charges and 30 vehicles. So we've got the infrastructure for the electric vehicles that we currently have on fleet.
Right.
What we don't have is the infrastructure for the remaining 170 vehicles, which are currently diesel. But by the year 2030, those 170 vehicles, ideally, we want to be electric. So we need to get the infrastructure in place, or at least a plan for the infrastructure in place now, ready for the next procurement. And the next procurement is not going to be 2030. The next procurement is going to be 2025. That's when the next batch of vehicles is due. And really what we want to be purchasing electric vehicles every time we go out to replace vehicles now.
Mm-hmm. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to comment on that, Phil said we're doing some research. We're actually working with Energy Savings Trust at the moment to look at precisely the sort of things that you're suggesting. How do we get that balance between, obviously wanting to keep costs down and use electricity when it's at its lowest rate, but also squaring that with the fact that we're constrained for space up at Battington Road, but also making sure that this key thing that I emphasised at the start, that operationally, it's really important that our vehicles are there, they're reliable, they're out on the road, they're not, we don't want them sitting on chargers with somebody there, waiting for the work to be done. So there's no easy answer, but Phil is on the case with the sort of experts in this field. And the other unknown, of course, is technology. It just changes so quickly. It may be that, what we see as challenges now, in 3 or 4 years' time, I think the whole thing may have changed and we may have, sort of other options. So I just wanted to reassure you that absolutely, as you say, Councillor Hutchins said yesterday, getting the best deal in terms of the cheapest deal is crucial, but so is operational reliability. And so is also making sure that, we can square that with having the constraints, because realistically, we're stuck with Battington Road. I've been around long enough in this council. There's been discussions about, are we going to have a new super depot and this, that, or the other. They've not come to light. And I think though it has its challenges, it's centrally located. It is a compact site. And I think, we're just going to have to live with that. So that's one of the parameters that we're having to, to factor in with this research.
Thanks, Andrew. I suppose one question that nobody else has got the hand up. One question that Councillor Shazad asked was about the possibility of renting the fleet, giving a bit more flexibility and reducing sort of, I suppose, maintenance cost. Well, not reducing maintenance costs, but reducing the space needed for maintenance in some respects. I mean, I'm not totally into, you know, outsourcing, but I'm thinking about how, you know, and it's also like the needs of the actual people. We're talking a lot about the vehicles, but we also need to look at the needs of the people that need these vehicles, and that's expanded. You've already said, you know, the huge costs of that have increased. So, you know, that we might be looking not at 140 vehicles, we might be looking at 340 vehicles come 2030. So I suppose it's, I don't know, yeah, just how will we deal with that?
I suppose if it ever gets that bad, Councillor Smith, then I guess we would have to look at outsourcing the transport. I don't just mean the vehicles, but I mean the whole transport, and using outsourced providers to help us out with our home to school transport needs, because there's just no way that we'll be able to get anything like that sort of numbers in Battington Road.
Andrew?
Yeah, just to comment on that, two things really. In the last procurement round that we did, which was just more or less finished, I think, Phil, there's just one or two other bits and bats that you're tidying up. Phil obviously looked at the whole thing about, you know, purchase versus lease, really. And I remember being, I remember spending quite a lot of time with Phil, with us going through the sort of figures on this and working out, you know, on the whole life costs and things like that as to the best option, because we have had a very mixed sort of bag before, Phil, haven't we? We've had some that we've owned outright, we've had some that we have leased and so on. We've tended to move more to purchasing outright simply because that at the moment the economics work for us. The other thing I will say on the leasing with maintenance stuff is, as Phil referred to, our sweepers, we have our sweepers on that arrangement where we lease them from a company. We put drivers in them, but that company is responsible for the maintenance. And the amount of to-ing and fro-ing we have with that company when, you know, a vehicle goes down and it goes off to them for repair, but all of a sudden there's no urgency in getting it back to us. Now, there are things written into the contract about, you know, turnaround times, and they've got to give us a replacement vehicle if they can't mend it within X hours. But when you're dealing with a third party, it introduces that sort of complication. Whereas if it's in Phil's workshop, and I don't know, I'll pick on highways, it's a highways vehicle, and you know, and they want to know when it's going to be fixed, and they're ringing Phil up, and we've got control over that. So, you know, operationally, it makes it a lot easier for us to, you know, to have vehicles that we've bought that we have the ability and skills and etc. to maintain. Final thing I just want to say, one of the challenges that we do have, of course, is that the maintenance regimes on electric vehicles are very different. And we've touched on apprenticeships, Mike raised that. I think it's fair to say, Phil, most of our mechanics are of a certain age, and we're probably trained in the 1970s with the traditional spanners and all that sort of thing. So there is a big issue about us, you know, bringing new people in who are having to learn new skills in terms of maintaining completely new sorts of vehicles, you know. So that's, again, one of those sort of challenges that Phil and his team are on with. And having an apprentice is part of that process.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions? Right, I think you've given us a good overview, and there's lots to consider, and you've got the report going to Cabinet on Monday. So thank you very, very much for coming, and I appreciate all the work that you've done and the visit yesterday, which was really interesting. So I think if we can let that go, we can move on to the next item, which is our work programme, and you're more than welcome to leave if you wish, unless you want to stay on and hear what we're going to talk about next.
I think we'll depart, Chair, if you don't mind.
No problem. Before I say thank you.
Before I go, Councillor Smith, if there's any other members that couldn't make the depot tour yesterday that do want to come and have a look round, then by all means you can get in touch with me and we can organise something. You're very welcome.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for all the work you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, over to Mike.
I'll be very brief, Chair. We always reset the work programme in the first meeting of the new council year, which will be your next meeting. So in a sense, we take account of what's on the list at the moment, but the new membership, and there will be some new members on this board next year, we'll take a fresh look at that. Councillor Smith and myself had a very useful discussion with Sheila and Richard Seaman this lunchtime about the planning peer review, which will come back on a regular basis to this board, but we decided it would be probably useful, particularly with some new members, to have a sort of an informal briefing development, bringing people up to speed session, as well as a formal item, and we'll be arranging that probably in June once we know what the membership of the board is next year. So that's all I've got to say on the work programme, except to say thank you very much to all the members for the work you've done this year, because this board, as well as doing all your normal business, picks up the lion's share of the petitions and the lion's share of the callings. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Diane and Fazana, and goodbye and good luck. Thank you. Thanks everybody for tonight.